Alright, so there's been something that I wanted to talk about that has taken precedent over other videos, and it seemed fitting to make this the first video for the Rhodesian Raccoon, since what has happened to the freedom fighters behind the scenes was very interesting to me, and I think this is going to highlight a very big thing that no one wants to discuss. Period. For those who are unaware of the issue I'm talking about, the freedom fighters are not being used in IDW because of some apparent recent legal issues. Ian Flynn confirmed this on his Twitter. Not too long after this, I started thinking about it and I asked others what they thought about this. And Dumbsville and I discussed this on Twitter. His response ended with, "It's probably some Duke Nukem-ish problem." Now this was brought up when Kyle, Ian Flynn's friend, or Droog, answered a question on the Bumblecast regarding the freedom fighters. And if you are reading this, you should probably guess how much respect Kyle gave to this one guy after he was clearly pissed off. And Sonic Boom staff member Bill Frieder said that Archie owned the freedom fighters. And on Twitter, Aquarius199 asked why were there any legal issues, and Kyle said they were off the table because of legal issues. Nothing interesting there. Aquarius later rephrased the question, saying he thought Sega owned the freedom fighters, and Kyle said Sega had tons of characters and it was up to the rights holders. And to another user, he said, why don't you just enjoy what they've already appeared in, since they've appeared in 23 other issues. And the way this one was phrased seemed very disrespectful, even in context of who it was towards. Now, with all of this, you'd think that that would be the end of the story. However, something didn't quite sit right with me. It seemed very bizarre that Sega would run into legal issues with characters that they've already owned. And you might even be asking yourself, why would Ian Flynn lie to the customer? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about. The first thing I noticed is that Sally and Bunny both appeared in the Forces prequel comic, and they also appeared with Rotor Walrus in Sonic's Spinball. Now, one can say that doesn't count because Scratch and Grounder are properties of Deke, and they also appeared in Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. However, in reality, they are technically property of Sega, and also the end credits of Adventures and Side IM both say all licensed characters are property of Sega. So Deke doesn't own the characters. What about Archie? And that would seem logical, however, it raises a ton of other problems. The reason being is that Archie would have to sign more paperwork, something which would take a lot of time to do and would cost a lot of money. Furthermore, the Freedom Fighters were created before Archie was even a thing, since they were created by Deke, but were property of Sega. So why would Archie buy the rights to characters off of Sega, if it's supposed to be Sega's comic? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you actually sit down and think about it. Furthermore, every single character that appeared in the reboot, is property of Sega. So these guys, they're property of Sega. These guys, also property of Sega. These guys, unfortunately, they're also property of Sega. So, if Archie doesn't own the Freedom Fighters, what about Ken Penders? Just don't. Don't even go there. You're not gonna win that fight at all. The lawsuit didn't even have any effect on the Freedom Fighters, because otherwise they wouldn't have appeared post-252. Or even after Geoffrey St. John's last appearance. And as I said, every character that appeared after 252 is property of Sega. So Frost the Hobonian asked Ian on Twitter about why, since Sega does indeed hold the rights to the Freedom Fighters. Now Ian has treated that they weren't included because they wanted to differentiate the book from Archie, which sounds reasonable. Now, while the comic itself has many of the problems that plagued the reboot, this response would have been acceptable. But no. Instead, he adds he can't include them because Sega won't let him. Now, Ian is not someone I trust to get me out of a house fire. He said he was done with shippings, even though there were already shippings in the book that were present. He said he fought tooth and nail to keep the Freedom Fighters, even though later on he said that he was working to get rid of them, and of course make the book more like the games because that's why people wanted to see Archie. And he sent out his own fan base to correct people, like they're some kind of thought police. So no, I don't trust this man for 1 second. Because the Sonic Boom team had practically little, if any, restrictions when they were writing. I mean, one of the writers was able to get away with writing Eggman as Donald Trump. I am not making this up. He was able to get away with that. And Ian himself has constantly said that Sega has given him a lot of creative freedom with this new comic. So if they give him a lot of creative freedom, why is he not allowed to do certain things? As much as he is. I mean, let's think about this for 1 second, and I'll let you think about it for right now, but I need to move on. And Ian himself has shown an immense interest in bringing Styx into the series. Okay? Fine. But, what exactly is preventing you from putting the Freedom Fighters into there? I'm just gonna show the clip.
Alright, and the next question comes from James M. At some point in the IDW Sonic, when will we see the IDW version of Styx show up and be part of that universe? In fact, could she and IDW Amy Rose become BFFs?
We'll work backwards on that. As far as I can tell, the canon version of Styx is that she is always friends with Amy. So that can just be assumed, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
When, where, and how we introduce Styx to the comic, I'm not going to say, because that would be spoilerific. I'm sure she'll show up at some point because she's super popular. She's like the only spin-off material that has bridged the gap into main canon that I can think of off the top of my head. And I'm not counting the Freedom Fighter showing up in Spinball. That's another thing altogether.
That's a sight gag, to be honest.
Yeah. That doesn't count, really. So, yeah, Styx will show up at some point.
And a very vaguely Grounder-esque robot being in Aquatic Ruin Zone in Sonic 2, that doesn't really count either.
I mean, Scratch, I think, is supposed to be a cluck, and that
is very... You're getting real iffy on those. So, yeah. I think that's pretty much true, yeah. So, I hope to see Styx soon. I'm just wondering, is she going to have the same design pretty much or anything that you know of?
Yeah, because her art on Sonic Channel is pretty much the same. So it looks like she's just coming over wholesale.
Sweet. Awesome.
So, a character that so far has appeared in 4 games, none of which are canon to the main series, is canon in the storyline. But the Freedom Fighters, who appeared in Sonic Spinball, which is canon to the games, although not canon in Ian's eyes, and I'm going to play this clip too, just to prove my point.
At Homura the best. Considering that you've made it clear that none of the Archie cast are returning for the IDW comics, which I don't think has been exactly how that's been phrased, but we'll go with it. Could you perhaps ask Aaliyah to elaborate on either the eventual fates and or backstories of Cassia and Clove? Also, could you perhaps elaborate on the planned backstory for Bunny in the reboot? It seemed like she was going to be revealed to be originating from the Soul Dimension, and I was wondering why this was.
Number one. Yeah, none of the Archie stuff is coming over because reasons. At least not now.
Yeah.
Because, it's with IDW, it's a new publisher, it's a new contract, it's a new relationship. So we need to establish IDW Sonic first before we start looking at bringing in characters from any other incarnation of the series. There are certainly characters from my old run that I would love to bring over if the opportunity appeared, but I don't know how viable that is. I don't even know if that's a possibility. So for now, I'm just saying, nope, off limits just to be safe, because that's probably how it's going to be. Maybe I'll be wrong. Who knows? But, issue 2 is out. It's a little early to say what the future of the book's going to be at this point. As for what Aaliyah's plans were for Cassia and Clove, or our plans for the future of that run of the book, or Evan's plans for the silver side of things, or whatever Tracy Yardley would have planned, I am hesitant to trot that out there, because as fans have pointed out a lot, IDW is famous for picking up incomplete old runs and seeing them through to the end. So there is a slim possibility that maybe someday, maybe, the old run of the book might see some form of conclusion And so I don't want to trot out all of our ideas before I know if that's a possibility or not. Now, that is a gigantic maybe. It could be that we never see that side of things again. And if we reach a point where that seems clear, then Lost Hedgehog Tales will include a chapter for that sort of thing. And Lost Hedgehog Tales is still a thing. It's just stuff. Okay, I'll get to it. I promise. I promised I would do it. It will happen. Just not nearly as soon as I thought it would.
Here's the thing. When you
Along with the longest-running comic book series that is based on a video game, which is beloved by many in the Penders and Flynn eras, suddenly they're not important. And let's also think about this, because there's been a giant petition to get them on the book. So, yeah, there's been a loud cry for these characters. Suddenly they're not important. And when thinking about it, Styx wasn't created by Sega, nor is she Japanese in origin. She's French-Canadian. Furthermore, if Sega owns the rights to Styx, why don't they own the rights to the Freedom Fighters? And furthermore, why is it automatically that Styx is a more important character, even though the Freedom Fighters were from the longest-running comic book series based on a video game, and were far more influential than any of the other characters from a spin-off? Also, Ian said that Styx could come over wholesale, so entirely from Boom. No explanation given, just she can come over wholesale and just be Amy's automatic best friend. I don't know anymore. And concerning the information I have just given to you, what pisses me off about this is that Ian Flynn is lying to the customer. And just to get this out there, I don't want the Freedom Fighters back in the book, because we could end up with something like this. Or this. Or this! And Ian Flynn has said that his opinions on the comic are that they're just an advertisement for the games. Okay, that would be fine. But it's not a very good advertisement. It's not like this.
Where am I?
Say goodbye to this nasty beard!
What happened to me?
I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Old Spice Shaving Gel!
Or even this.
Bên aiวะไม่เห็นมีเงินเลยมีแต่โยเกิร์ตยังไงอ่ะกินลองท้องไปก่อนดีไหมพี่ดีเหมือนกันมีปัญหาเรื่องสายตา
And that's the thing, is that there really aren't any legal issues involving the Freedom Fighters. It's not that they can't use them. In fact, Ian has said before, they've given him immense creative freedom with this new comic. So much so that he was able to create a bunch of new characters. 3 of them, to be precise. So he has the creative freedom to add new characters without the approval of Sega, but he can't add old classics like Tiara Bubowski or Antoine de Colette. It doesn't make any sense why he wouldn't be able to. It makes sense why he wouldn't want to, since he's not the biggest fan of the Freedom Fighters. And, you know, I understand. If you don't like the character and you don't want to work with them, okay, that's fine. But you have to be honest about it. Otherwise, you'll piss off a good portion of the fan base, and they won't buy your book. Then what are you gonna do? Although an even weirder example of Sega's supposed meddling is with Jennifer Hernandez. Because if you thought the whole Freedom Fighter thing wasn't weird enough, this one should. So if you've ever asked the question of why is it that they're using egg pawn designs from Sonic Heroes and not the ones from Sonic Forces, well, here's the reason as to why. Now in issue 3, they did use the egg pawn design. However, this is where things get weird because Ian Flynn had to tell Jen that they weren't allowed to use that because Sega didn't give them the rights to use it. Yes. I repeat, Ian Flynn had to tell her that. No one else, no one at Sega told her, okay, you can't use this, so just keep that in mind. No, Ian Flynn was the one who had to tell her. And no one else did. I really don't know where that came from or why. It just sort of happened. Now, if you're wondering why the hell did I bring that up if it had nothing to do with the original thing, well, I thought it would show just how corrupt and inconsiderate Ian Flynn is as a person. Now, I don't like Jennifer Hernandez. I think she is a horrible person, and I really don't want her working in the comic industry. I want her working somewhere else, but the fact that Ian, of all people, who agreed with her on shippings and other things, such as politics, fan bases, etc., would backstab her. I think that's just the seediest fucking thing I've ever seen. And you have to remember is that this is a woman who attacked fans who had legitimate concerns about how Ian Flynn basically lied to them, and I'm already defending her. I shouldn't be having to defend this woman. So Ian has told one of his colleagues something that most likely isn't true, and it's something that he most likely made up for whatever reason. And this isn't even the seediest thing Ian Flynn has ever done. But we'll save this for another video. Oh, we'll be getting back to this, don't you worry. And I know this is gonna sound kind of crazy. Kinda really crazy. But I think this might be some kind of bizarre plot by Ian Flynn, which involves rallying up the fan base against Sega, because Sega, according to him, are the reason as to why there are all these mandates and why the issues have felt so formulaic, let's just say. And this, I think, is very familiar because most people know about the original lawsuit and the mandates from Archie post-reboot from Ian Flynn's forums. And I'm going to say this right now, but those forums were a total echo chamber. There was no differentiation of opinions whatsoever. Either you agreed with Ian Flynn or you got off. And Zealous Fox pointed this out in a podcast he did with Alex Hedgefox and That Umbrella Guy, where Ian would not let him into the forums, simply because he already had an account on a SatAM fan site. So misinformation was bound to spread there pretty quickly, and it was pretty much stated as fact that the whole reboot was caused by Ken Penders, and that Sega handled the situation very poorly. So in that instance, Ian basically turned the fans against both Sega and Ken Penders. So those two sides had to take fall for what Ian Flynn did, because as he pointed out, the reboot was simply the fast forward button to make the comics more like the games. And as I pointed out earlier in the video, Ian Flynn sent his own fans just to quell any dissidents. So here I think what Ian Flynn is trying to do is that he's trying to blame all of the comics problems on Sega, because he realized that there was a good portion of people who were very angry and felt that the comic was too formulaic and too generic and boring, so he decided to blame all of those problems on Sega. And then, once the fans are riled up enough, they go after Sega apologizes to Ian Flynn, and then Sega gets him a game. And I have to say, that actually is very ingenious of him. I have to give him credit for that. He's not smart enough to keep his mouth shut, but he is smart enough to manipulate the fans. Very well done, Mr. Flynn. Very well done indeed. But hey, that's just a theory. No, I am not doing the meme! And, if you would be so kind as to hit that like and subscribe button if you like the content, and if you don't, tell me why. I'd like to improve my content and see where I can improve in certain areas, certainly. So, peace out.